The red Ferrari 308 GTS from Magnum PI is one of TV's most iconic cars, but behind the glossy paint and Hawaiian sunsets lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets, surprising casting decisions, and weird automotive quirks that even die-hard fans don't know. From fiberglass stunt doubles built on Pontiac chassis to a famous journalist's 140 mph cross-country joyride in the actual Season 1 car, the story of this legendary vehicle is far stranger than fiction. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Magnum P1's Ferrari 308 GTS. Fact 1. The Ferrari was originally supposed to be a Porsche 928. When the creators of Magnum P1 were planning the show in the late 1970s, they had a very different car in mind for their Hawaiian private investigator to drive. The original vision wasn't a Ferrari at all, but rather a Porsche 928, which was considered the epitome of luxury sports cars at that time. The producers approached Porsche with a specific request to modify one of their 928s to make it work better for filming, particularly asking for an enlarged sunroof that would allow for better aerial shots of the car cruising through the beautiful Hawaiian landscape. On top of that, they needed modifications to accommodate the show's leading man, Tom Selleck, who stood at an imposing 6 feet 4 inches tall and simply didn't fit comfortably in most sports cars of that era. However, Porsche had a strict company policy against making custom specifications at the request of individual customers, even for a major television production. They flatly refused to alter their 928 design for the show, essentially passing on what would become one of the most valuable product placements in television history. When the producers turned to Ferrari with the same request, the Italian automaker took the complete opposite approach and was more than happy to work with the production team. Ferrari agreed to modify their 308 GTS to fit Selleck's tall frame and to accommodate the show's filming needs, which included removing the seat padding and bolting the seats as far back as possible. This decision by Ferrari to cooperate where Porsche would not inadvertently created one of the most iconic car and television partnerships ever, making the red Ferrari 308 GTS forever synonymous with Magnum PI and cementing its place in pop culture history. Fact 2. Tom Selleck's 6'4" frame required seat surgery. Tom Selleck's imposing height of 6 feet 4 inches created a significant problem when it came time to film Magnum PI, because the Ferrari 308 GTS was designed for drivers of considerably more average proportions. The Italian sports car's compact cockpit simply wasn't built to accommodate someone as tall as Selleck, and the production team quickly realized they had a serious issue on their hands if they wanted their leading man to look natural behind the wheel. Ferrari had to perform what could only be described as automotive surgery on the cars to make them workable for filming. The modifications were quite extensive and involved completely removing all of the padding from the driver's seat so that Selleck could sit as low as physically possible in the car, giving him a few precious extra inches of headroom that he desperately needed. The production team also had the seats bolted as far away from the steering wheel as the car's design would allow, pushing them back to their absolute maximum distance to give Selleck's long legs enough room to operate the pedals without his knees hitting the dashboard. Despite all of these careful modifications and adjustments, the solution was far from perfect. Even with the seats stripped down and pushed back as far as they could go, Selleck's head still rose noticeably higher than the top of the windshield frame in most shots throughout the series. If you watch the show carefully, you can clearly see that his head extends well above where it would normally sit in the car, which is why viewers very rarely saw Magnum driving with the removable targa top in place. The production almost always filmed him with the top down, not just because it looked better for a show set in sunny Hawaii, but also because it was simply more comfortable for Selleck and made the height issue less visually awkward on camera. Fact 3. Fiberglass kit cars on Pontiac Fiero chassis were used for dangerous stunts. The production of Magnum P1 required countless high-speed chases and dangerous driving sequences that put the cars through extreme conditions, but the real Ferrari 308 GTS models were far too expensive and valuable to risk destroying in every stunt scene. To solve this problem, the production team employed a clever and cost-effective solution by using fiberglass replica kit cars that were built on Pontiac Fiero chassis as stunt doubles for the genuine Ferraris. These kit cars were made entirely of lightweight fiberglass body panels that were carefully molded to look exactly like the real Ferrari from a distance, and they were mounted on the much more affordable and readily available Pontiac Fiero platform underneath. The Fiero was actually an ideal choice for this purpose because it was a mid-engine sports car just like the Ferrari, which meant the proportions and driving characteristics were similar enough to maintain believability on screen during action sequences. The kit car replicas could be driven hard, crashed into things, jumped over obstacles, or damaged in any way the script required, without the production having to worry about destroying a six-figure Italian exotic car in the process. These budget-friendly stunt doubles allowed the show to film all of the aggressive driving scenes and dangerous stunts that made Magnum PI so exciting to watch, while the pristine, genuine Ferraris were reserved for close-up shots and scenes where the car needed to look perfect. The substitution was so seamless that most viewers watching the show had no idea they were looking at a fiberglass replica built on a Pontiac frame rather than the real thing. This clever bit of Hollywood magic saved the production an enormous amount of money over the course of 8 seasons and protected the actual Ferraris from the kind of wear and tear that would have made them worthless by the time filming wrapped. Fact 4. The pilot episode had 2 different license plates. Eagle-eyed fans who watch the Magnum PI pilot movie closely will notice a strange continuity error involving the Ferrari's license plate that somehow persisted throughout the entire 8-season run of the series. In the pilot episode that first aired in December of 1980, the red Ferrari 308 GTS displayed a regular Hawaii license plate with the number 56E-478 for most of the scenes. However, there was one brief scene during a chase sequence near a tunnel where the license plate inexplicably changed to 561-068 before switching back to the original 56E-478 number for the rest of the pilot. The confusion didn't end there, because the now famous Robin 1 vanity plate that fans associate with the show wasn't actually introduced until the second episode titled China Doll, when the producers decided that a personalized plate referencing the mysterious millionaire novelist Robin Masters would be a nice touch that reinforced the character's ownership of the vehicle. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that even after the Robin 1 plate became the standard for every single episode from the second one forward, the original opening credits sequence continued to feature footage from the pilot showing the old 56E-478 license plate. This means that every time viewers watched the iconic opening of Magnum PI, throughout all 8 seasons, they were seeing the pilot's temporary license plate in that memorable shot of Magnum smiling at the camera before flooring the Ferrari in a controlled slide. The production team apparently never bothered to reshoot that particular opening credits footage with the correct Robin 1 plate, so millions of fans watched that inconsistency week after week without ever realizing it was technically showing a license plate that only appeared in the very first episode. Fact 5. A famous journalist drove the Season 1 Ferrari cross country at 140 miles per hour. In 1979, before Magnum PI even aired its first episode, the very same 1978 Ferrari 308 GTS that would be used throughout Season 1 had to be delivered from New York to Los Angeles as part of the process of getting it to Hawaii for filming. Ferrari needed someone to drive the car across the country, and they turned to Car and Driver magazine to see if one of their writers would be interested in making the journey and documenting the experience. The magazine assigned the task to P.J. O'Rourke, who was already a well-known journalist and satirist with a reputation for irreverent humor and bold writing. O'Rourke jumped at the opportunity and embarked on what became an absolutely wild cross-country adventure behind the wheel of what would soon become one of television's most famous vehicles. During the trip, O'Rourke pushed the Ferrari to its absolute limits on American highways, hitting speeds that reached 140 miles per hour as he raced westward across the country. He later wrote a hilarious and detailed essay about his experience called Ferrari Refutes the Decline of the West, which captured all of the excitement, danger, and pure joy of driving an exotic Italian sports car at breakneck speeds across thousands of miles of American roads. The essay was eventually published in his 1989 book, titled Republican Party Reptile, where it became one of his most celebrated pieces of automotive writing. O'Rourke's account of the journey described the Ferrari as an incredible machine and painted a vivid picture of what it felt like to pilot that specific car at speeds that were highly illegal but absolutely thrilling. Few fans of Magnum P1 realized that the Ferrari they watched in the first season had such a remarkable adventure before it ever appeared on their television screens. Fact 6. The early 308 GTBs were made entirely of fiberglass. When Ferrari first introduced the 308 GTB at the Paris Motor Show in 1975, the company made a radical and unprecedented decision that shocked the automotive world by building the car's body almost entirely out of fiberglass instead of the traditional steel or aluminum that Ferrari had always used for their production vehicles. This marked the first and only time in Ferrari's history that they would produce a road car with a fiberglass body, which they called vetroracina in Italian. The decision to use fiberglass was partly practical, as it allowed Ferrari to get the new model to customers more quickly, but it also offered significant performance benefits because fiberglass construction made these early 308 GTB models a remarkable 331 pounds lighter than the steel-bodied versions that would come later. Only the front hood was made from aluminum, while virtually everything else on the car's exterior was molded fiberglass, and Ferrari's subsidiary company Carrozzeria Scaglietti handled the actual manufacturing of these lightweight composite bodies. However, despite the impressive weight savings and the technical advantages of fiberglass construction, Ferrari discovered that their wealthy clientele had serious reservations about the material. Many customers felt that fiberglass had a cheap or down-market feel to it, especially when compared to the prestigious image of traditional steel or aluminum bodywork that people expected from an expensive Italian exotic car. Some owners also complained about creaks and squeaks that the fiberglass bodies produced, and the material didn't take paint quite as well as metal did, which affected the car's premium appearance. Between 1975 and 1977, Ferrari built only somewhere between 712 and 808 of these fiberglass-bodied 308 GTB models, before switching to conventional steel construction for all subsequent production, making these early vetroresina versions extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors today. Fact 7. 3 different Ferrari models were used across 8 seasons. Throughout the 8-season run of Magnum P1 from 1980 to 1988, the production actually used 3 completely different variants of the Ferrari 308, with each change reflecting the real-world evolution of Ferrari's production models during that same time period. The first season featured a 1978 Ferrari 308 GTS that came equipped with the original carburetor system and 4 Weber carburetors, which produced around 240 horsepower and gave the car its distinctive throaty sound that enthusiasts loved. Starting with the second season and continuing through most of the 6th season, the show upgraded to a 1980 Ferrari 308 GTSI, where the I stood for iniezione or fuel injection in Italian. This version featured Bosch fuel injection and electronic ignition systems that replaced the carburetors, which unfortunately dropped the horsepower down to around 205, but reduced emissions to meet increasingly strict environmental regulations in the United States. Then, midway through the 4th season, the production made its final and most significant upgrade to a 1984 Ferrari 308 GTS Quattrovalvole, which remained the featured car for seasons 7 and 8 until the show ended. The Quattrovalvole name, which means 4 valves in Italian, referred to the new 4-valve per-cylinder engine design that Ferrari had introduced, and this technical improvement brought the power back up to around 230 horsepower while also improving reliability and performance. Careful viewers who knew their Ferraris could spot the differences between these 3 versions by looking at details like the number and style of the exterior mirrors, the presence or absence of hood vents, the color of the vents behind the headlights, and whether the car had a rear spoiler, as each model year had its own distinctive visual characteristics that set it apart from the others. Fact 8. Up to 5 different Ferraris were used each season. The production of Magnum P1 was far more complex than viewers might have imagined when it came to managing the Ferrari 308 GTS vehicles, because the show actually maintained as many as 5 different actual Ferrari cars during each season of filming to handle the various demands of television production. These multiple vehicles weren't just backups sitting around in case something went wrong, but rather each car served a very specific purpose based on what type of scene was being filmed. The production team designated certain Ferraris as dedicated action cars that were used exclusively for driving sequences, car chases, and any scenes that involved more aggressive or demanding use of the vehicle, while other pristine examples were carefully reserved only for close-up shots, static beauty shots, and scenes where the car needed to look absolutely perfect on camera without a scratch or blemish. All of these genuine Ferrari vehicles, regardless of their specific role in production, were fitted with the same iconic Robin 1 vanity license plate, so they would all match on screen and maintain continuity throughout each episode. Ferrari North America actually provided all of these cars to the production, which made the arrangement beneficial for both the show and the automaker, since Ferrari received invaluable publicity and product placement, while the show got access to multiple examples of an exotic car they otherwise couldn't have afforded. When filming for a particular season wrapped up, Ferrari North America would take possession of the cars that had been used, give them fresh paint jobs and complete servicing to restore them to excellent condition, and then sell them to their first private owners as used Ferraris with the unique history of having appeared on one of television's most popular shows. Most of these cars were eventually auctioned off over the years, with some examples commanding prices nearly double that of identical Ferraris without the Magnum P1 connection. Fact 9. Ferrari gave Tom Selleck his own personal 308 GTS. Ferrari recognized very early on that having their 308 GTS featured so prominently on one of television's hottest shows was an incredibly valuable marketing opportunity that money simply couldn't buy, and they wanted to show their appreciation to Tom Selleck for the role he played in making their car a cultural icon. The Italian automaker decided to give Selleck his own personal Ferrari 308 GTS as a gift, which he could keep for himself and drive whenever he wanted, completely separate from the cars that were being used for filming the show. This was an extraordinarily generous gesture considering that the 308 GTS was an exotic sports car worth well over $50,000 at the time, but Ferrari understood that the exposure they were getting from Magnum PI was worth far more than the cost of a single vehicle. Having a charismatic leading man like Selleck behind the wheel of their car week after week in front of millions of viewers was the kind of publicity that advertising agencies could only dream about, and it helped cement the Ferrari 308 GTS as one of the most desirable sports cars of the 1980s. However, Selleck found himself in an awkward position when it came to actually using his personal Ferrari in Hawaii, where the show was filmed and where he spent a considerable amount of time during those years. In a later interview, Selleck admitted with characteristic humor that he couldn't drive that around Hawaii because he would have looked ridiculous doing so in real life. The problem was that everyone on the island associated the red Ferrari with Thomas Magnum, the character Selleck played, and driving it around town would have made it impossible for him to separate his real life from his television persona. It would have seemed like he was trying too hard to be the character, or showing off in a way that didn't match his more down-to-earth personality off camera. Fact 10. The car was destroyed multiple times on screen. One of the running jokes throughout Magnum P1 was that Thomas Magnum consistently managed to damage, destroy, or otherwise abuse Robin Master's beautiful Ferrari despite being responsible for its care, and the writers took full advantage of this premise by subjecting the poor car to an absolutely ridiculous amount of punishment over 8 seasons. The Ferrari was blown up not just once but multiple times during the series, with car bombs and other explosives turning it into twisted metal and shattered glass on more than one memorable occasion. In the episode Try to Remember from Season 2, Magnum was knocked unconscious, and the Ferrari was pushed over a cliff with him still inside, leaving both the detective and the car in terrible condition at the bottom of a hillside. The vehicle was also completely destroyed by a car bomb in an episode where the character Mac was killed by a Russian agent named Ivan, requiring yet another replacement. Beyond the major catastrophic damage, the Ferrari suffered through countless smaller incidents that would have driven any real car owner absolutely insane with frustration. The car was riddled with bullets from small weapons fire during shootouts, had its windows smashed by various characters including the ex-wife of one of Magnum's friends, got egged by angry teenagers in one episode, was covered in grease in another episode that forced Magnum to drive around in his shorts, had its radio stolen while Magnum was distracted, and got stuck in mud during a particularly desperate attempt to make it back in time for the Army-Navy game. The Ferrari underwent dozens of repair jobs throughout the series, for everything from dented fenders and transmission replacements to fixing the damage from all the bullet holes and scratches it accumulated. Fans of the show even kept tallies of all the damage incidents, turning Magnum's terrible track record with the Ferrari into one of the show's most beloved recurring elements. Fact 11. Tom Selleck bought his 3 co-stars Porsche 928 seconds. At the end of the 7th season of Magnum P1, The show was originally planned to end with Magnum being killed off, which would have brought the series to a dramatic and final conclusion. However, fans were absolutely outraged by this decision and demanded a more satisfying ending for their beloved character, which led the network to bring the show back for an 8th and final season that would properly wrap up the story. To convince Tom Selleck to return for this additional season, CBS offered him a substantial bonus of $350,000, which was an enormous sum of money in the late 1980s. Rather than keeping all of that bonus for himself, Selleck made the incredibly generous decision to spend the vast majority of it on lavish gifts for the cast and crew who had worked alongside him for all those years, showing a level of gratitude and kindness that was quite rare in Hollywood. Selleck went on an extraordinary spending spree that included buying Rolex watches for many of the people who worked on the show, handing out $1,000 cash bonuses to crew members, and making one particularly ironic purchase that connected back to the show's automotive history. He bought brand new Porsche 928s for his 3 main co-stars, Larry Manetti, who played Rick, Roger Mosley, who played TC, and John Hillerman, who played Higgins. The irony of this gift was impossible to miss, because the Porsche 928 was the exact same car that the producers had originally wanted to use for Magnum P.I. before Porsche refused to cooperate, and Ferrari stepped in with the 308 GTS instead. Selleck's choice to give his friends the car that could have been the star of the show instead of the Ferrari added a perfect touch of humor to an already remarkably generous gesture. Fact 12. A green Ferrari 308 QV appeared in one episode. Throughout the entire 8-season run of Magnum P1, the Ferrari 308 GTS that viewers came to know and love was always painted in the classic Ferrari red color known as Rosso Corsa, which became so closely associated with the show that most people can't imagine the car in any other shade. However, there was exactly one episode in the entire series where a Ferrari in a completely different color made a prominent appearance, breaking this established pattern in a way that surprised many longtime fans. The episode was titled Summer School, and it aired as the 13th episode of Season 6, and the storyline involved Robin Masters having a visiting nephew named R.J. Toms, who needed a car to drive during his stay at Robin's Nest Estate in Hawaii. Rather than having the nephew use Magnum's familiar red Ferrari, the show introduced a second Ferrari 308 that was painted in a dark green color, officially known as Verde Pino, which translates to pine green in English. This was a 1981 Ferrari 308 GTSI Quattro Valvole that was supposedly part of Robin Masters' impressive car collection, and it was presented as a perfectly reasonable option for the nephew to use since Magnum was already driving the red one. The Verde Pino Ferrari was featured prominently throughout the Summer School episode and gave viewers a rare glimpse at what the iconic car would look like in a color other than red, although the unfamiliar green shade looked quite strange to fans who had spent years watching the red version. This dark green Ferrari 308 GTS IQV holds the unique distinction of being the only non-red Ferrari ever featured in the original Magnum P.I. series, making it a true oddity in the show's history, and a piece of trivia that even dedicated fans often overlook or forget about entirely. Fact 13. The opening credits contain a mirrored helicopter. The iconic opening credits sequence of Magnum P.I. became one of the most recognizable and beloved title sequences in television history, featuring sweeping shots of Hawaii, Tom Selleck's charming smile, and the red Ferrari racing through paradise, all set to that unforgettable theme music. However, there's a glaring visual mistake hidden right at the very beginning of the opening credits that somehow made it into every single episode throughout the show's entire 8-season run, and most viewers never noticed it despite watching those same opening credits hundreds of times. The very first shot of the sequence shows TC's helicopter flying through the Hawaiian sky, but if you look carefully at the aircraft in that initial moment, you'll see that the tail rotor is positioned on the right side of the helicopter, which is the opposite of where it should actually be located on that particular model of helicopter. The error occurred because the production team accidentally used a mirrored or flipped version of the helicopter footage for that opening shot, which reversed the entire image and placed the tail rotor on the wrong side of the aircraft. Then, just a moment later, when the opening credits sequence continues to show more shots of the helicopter, the tail rotor suddenly appears in its correct position on the left side, where it's supposed to be on an MD 500 series helicopter, which is what TC flew in the show. This means that anyone watching closely would see the tail rotor magically jump from one side of the helicopter to the other, within just a few seconds of the opening sequence beginning. The mistake is particularly noticeable to aviation enthusiasts or anyone familiar with helicopter design, but the vast majority of casual viewers were too caught up in the excitement and energy of the opening credits to ever spot this continuity error that persisted throughout the show's entire broadcast run. Fact 14. The theme song became a top 40 hit. The Magnum PI theme song is instantly recognizable to anyone who watched television during the 1980s, with its driving beat, energetic brass section, and distinctive guitar riffs that perfectly captured the excitement and adventure of the show. What many people don't realize is that this iconic piece of music actually became a legitimate radio hit, which was an extremely rare achievement for a television theme song in an era when most TV themes were simply background music that audiences heard but never thought about purchasing. The theme was composed by the legendary television music duo of Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, who were responsible for creating some of the most memorable TV themes of that era, and they brought in Grammy-winning guitarist Larry Carlton to perform the guitar parts that gave the song its signature sound and energy. The theme proved so popular with viewers that Elektra Records decided to release an extended version of the song as a commercial single in 1982, stretching the music out to 3 minutes and 25 seconds to make it suitable for radio airplay. The gamble paid off spectacularly when the instrumental track actually climbed onto the Billboard Hot 100 chart, competing against regular pop songs with vocals and lyrics and holding its own despite being purely instrumental music from a television show. The Magnum PI theme reached its peak position at number 25 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May of 1982, which was an almost unheard-of accomplishment for any TV theme song. This extended version also appeared on Mike Post's 1982 album titled Television Theme Songs, and the success of the Magnum PI theme helped establish it as one of the most beloved and commercially successful pieces of television music ever created, proving that the show's appeal extended far beyond just the episodes themselves. Fact 15. One original Ferrari is now at Universal Studios Hollywood. When Magnum PI finally wrapped up production in 1988 after 8 successful seasons, the question of what would happen to all those famous red Ferraris became a matter of great interest to both fans and car collectors who understood the historical significance these vehicles had gained. Ferrari North America, which had provided all of the cars to the production throughout the show's run, took possession of the vehicles once filming concluded and put them through a complete restoration process that included fresh paint jobs and thorough mechanical servicing to return them to excellent condition before selling them to private buyers. These cars commanded premium prices because of their connection to one of the most popular television shows of the decade, and they've changed hands numerous times over the years at auctions and private sales, with some examples selling for nearly double the price of identical Ferraris without the Magnum PI provenance. Actor Larry Manetti, who played Rick Wright throughout the entire series and was one of Tom Selleck's closest friends on the show, decided to purchase one of the early Ferrari 308 GTS models for himself when they became available, and according to reports he still owns that car to this day, as a treasured memento of his time on Magnum PI. Another one of the original cars, specifically a 1978 Ferrari 308 GTS from the first season, ended up on permanent display at the Cars of the Stars Motor Museum in Keswick, Cumbria, England, where visitors can see it in person. Perhaps most notably for American fans, a 1984 Ferrari 308 GTS Quattro Valvole that was actually driven by Tom Selleck during filming is now permanently displayed at Universal Studios Hollywood in California as part of their famous Fast Cars attraction, where it continues to draw crowds of nostalgic visitors who want to see the legendary vehicle up close and relive their memories of watching Magnum race through Hawaii.